Hi there, and welcome to this video about nested for loops in youSRC. Sometimes when we create our apps we need to run a loop, and then within the loop each iteration of the loop we also need another loop to take place. So for example in this app that I'm trying to produce here, I would like to display on the screen the values of the times tables. So I'd like to do the 1 times table from numbers 1 to 12, 2 times table on the line underneath from numbers 2 through to 24, etc, etc. Okay, so I need to work my way through each iteration of the loop, the main loop, which will run 12 times, but then each time that happens, so the first time it runs as an example is the 1 times table, so I need to then run a loop that does each of the values in the 1 times table. Yep, then it moves on to the next loop and so on and so forth. It's probably easier if we just work our way through it. So anyway, let's put in our first loop. So I'm going to have a loop counter. So okay. And this is stepping up by 1 each time, so I don't need to put the step value in there. So open and close my curly braces for that. Right, okay. Now what I need to do inside of here is create another loop. So if you imagine the loop 1 to 12 is basically going, so this main loop here is going to be just sorting out each line. So we're going to need 12 lines in total, so we're going to have 12 runs through the loop. But on each line I then need to display the values for each times table. So in this case I'm going to do 4 and I'm going to need another variable. So actually I might put it on the end of this one. Let's call this a nested loop. So when we place one loop inside of another, it's called a nested loop. Okay. Now then, on this one I'm going to want to do the current value, so if we work that out, so we can say let's just copy that. The current value equal, now then, if we think about it, what we've got is the first time round the loop counter is 1, and then when we come into this loop, nested loop counter is going to be 1. Yeah, so the first value we want is 1 times 1. The next time round the loop counter is 1, nested loop counter is 2. A nested loop counter is going to go up by 1 each time. So actually I can be clever here and use my actual loop counters to help me. So loop counter times nested loop counter. Okay. And then I'm going to do gfx.write, and I'm going to do the current value. Okay, and then I'm going to put in a set of 2 spaces. Okay, after each, well, the last thing I want to do in the main loop is to go to a new line. And let's see how that works. Okay, found a problem, expected the 2 in the for statement, so it made a bit of an error there. Yep, it's capital. Okay. Okay, so we can see that that's worked. Okay, so on each line, so this line here I've got my 1 times table. On this line here I've got my 2 times table, and so on and so forth. Right, so let's just actually have a look at that this time. But this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the app with the debugger. Okay, and we'll see how this actually works. Okay, so if we run the highlighted line, if the loop counter is 1 to 12, then we go into nested loop counter. Okay, or the nested loop, at which point that's going to keep running. And if we scroll back over a little bit, we're able to see how this actually, so we can see it runs through these. Okay, till we get to 12. Okay, then it doesn't do anything for that loop. It's gone through the loop, it's found that it's 13, goes to the new line, then goes back to the main loop, and then we're back into the for loop again. So then we do the 2, the 4, the 6 and the 8 and so on. Okay, and we can see that running. So we get all the way through to 24, which is there. This point the nested loop counter is at 12. Okay, comes back up, it checks whether it's 13, realises it can't do that, so it's out of the loop, then it goes to the new line, and then we're into the 3 times table, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I'll finish with that with a free run. So that's how you can use an example of using a nested loop. So it's putting one loop inside of another loop.